The moment police tried to save an 85-year-old priest's life in Normandy, but could they have averted the whole incident? Candles and more candles. Good evening. Tonight, new images have been produced showing the police response to yesterday's attack in which two teenagers broke into a church service in Normandy and slit the throat of the elderly celebrant. It's done nothing to contain the political fallout in France and across Europe. Tonight, we talk to one of President Hollande's key aides and ask how divided is France and what can be done to spur a more multicultural environment. This is the Pope visiting Poland declares the world is at war.
C'è guerra di interessi.
There is a war of interests, a war for money, a war for resources of nature, and a war to control people. This is war.
In Philadelphia, Hillary Clinton punches a great big hole in the glass ceiling in her bid to become America's next president. Tonight, Barack Obama is on this stage. The persistent themes of his presidency, race and justice, personified last night by mothers of sons and daughters killed by the police who came out for Hillary.
First, I believe that she is a person that has been very sympathetic to all the mothers because she's a mother and a grandmother, but before all of that, she's a woman.
Also on tonight's programme, a firefighter who got compensation and an apology from Scotland Yard after he alleged officers tasered and racially abused him, tells us racism in the Met is like a disease. The untouchables strike back. We report on the Hindus cast out from society by an accident at birth, now mounting a campaign against the abuse they've endured for centuries. And virtual reality you can actually get to grips with, how the technology of the gaming world is helping develop the next generation of prosthetic limbs.
The police operation to end the siege at Normandy Church has now been revealed in new footage when two attackers murdered an elderly priest while he was leading yesterday's morning prayers. More details are emerging about the killers, both thought to be 19 years old. One had been on a police watch list, the other had tried twice to reach Syria to fight with so-called Islamic State. As we go on air, the Amaq news agency is reporting that IS has posted video of two men it claims are the attackers, pledging allegiance to the group's leader. Porrick O'Brien has this report.
The utter incongruity of yesterday's attack, filmed on a phone. Morning birdsong outside. Inside the quintessential French parish church, the unspeakable has happened. The man with the mobile trying to make sense of it.
Ça a tiré. Il y a l'armée et tout.
By now, 85-year-old Father Jacques Hamel has been murdered.
Il y a quelqu'un qui a crié Allahu Akbar dans l'église, oui.
At this point, a 19-year-old local, Adel Kamish, and another assailant are still alive. As well as killing the priest, they've critically wounded another. And they have hostages.
Il y a des explosifs, les mecs.
One of the hostages is released. Then things accelerate. We hear a series of muted bangs.
Ouais, ils viennent de dire qu'il y avait 2 personnes de décédées, c'est chaud.
More details have emerged about the 19-year-old killer Adel Kamish. Tried to join IS in Syria twice, detained and sent back twice, released in March on bail, made to wear an electronic tag. Today, the judge who heard his case said Kamish decided to fight Jihad at home as revenge because his attempts to do so in Syria were foiled. This is where the teenager lived with his mother. She was interviewed upon his return from Syria last year. She said the Charlie Hebdo massacre changed him. Terror begetting terror.
The killing of Charlie Hebdo acted as a detonator. He spoke with words that did not belong to him. He was bewitched, like a cult.
On his attempts to travel to Syria, she added,
Fortunately, we managed to catch him twice. If he managed to get to Syria, I'd write off my son. I want to know who messed up our child.
In the town of Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray, Father Jacques baptised, married, buried generations in this town. At the other end of the hierarchy, the Pope, on a visit to Poland today, paid tribute to Father Jack. He also talked of a world at war, but not, he said, a religious one. All the world's religions, he said, wanted peace. Later, he broached again what he described as the complex phenomenon of migration and reiterated his call for a spirit of readiness to welcome those fleeing. Earlier, the Archbishop of Paris shoulder to shoulder with Muslim leaders. He spoke of the terrorist culture of death and the propaganda of nihilism. Cue a debate in the French media. The news channel BFM and the Le Monde newspaper decided not to broadcast pictures of the killer. A memorial mass for Father Jacques has just finished in the grandeur of the Notre Dame Cathedral. But outside, in a country hit so many times, turning the other cheek is turning to tough talk on security.
Well, joining us now from Paris is Corinne Narassiguin. She is the spokeswoman for President Hollande's Socialist Party. Corinne Narassiguin, to what extent do you think the security services let France down in the course of the Normandy issue, given that they knew so much about these two men?
Well, we'll have to see what the inquiry says exactly about the judicial process. We know that the counterterrorism team had put these young men under surveillance, and they were one of them was on probation with the electronic bracelet, and this was a decision by a judge. So we'll have to see. Those procedures need to be tightened, or if we need to take measures specific to youngsters or anyone who is suspected of terrorism, even if we have no proof of them being actually involved in a plot, which is really where the difficulty lies, because we cannot start putting people in prison without actual proof. And this is where we as democracies in general, not just France, have to find the right balance between protecting our individual liberties and respecting the rule of law and ensuring security. And
right.
It's a very tough balance, a very narrow path to find.
But you mentioned the word democracy, and democracy is at the heart of this issue, is it not? In the sense that France is revealed as a deeply divided country. I mean, Nice, Paris, Normandy, and that's only 3 of the incidents. And in each, one's talking about people who come from alienated communities that have never really been in the mainstream of the society that is France.
I don't want to make these kind of generalizations. I think most populations, most French citizens who have foreign descent are actually, most of them, well integrated. They feel French. They do believe in the French Republic. But there's a minority of them that obviously can be easily manipulated into with this very powerful propaganda that the Islamic State is throwing out there on the internet.
But forgive me. I mean, for example, if you look at Paris, here is a city in which really those people from ethnic minorities, particularly from North Africa, are out in the suburbs, and very many of them very poor suburbs, whilst the French elite exist in the middle of the city in some considerable splendor.
Well, I don't think the divide is so clear-cut. Obviously, there are a lot of discriminations that we must fight against, and there's a lot of people from ethnic minorities who do suffer from these discriminations for access to jobs and good jobs and housing, and this is absolutely something that we need to continue to work on, which means that the answer is cannot just be about security. It has to be about all of us working together, and not just the state, but also the businesses, the education system, our communities. But you see, I mean, have to see that some of these youngsters actually in the past who have committed acts of terrorism or who have gone to Syria were actually well integrated from families, or some of them were well off. So right. It's not so clear-cut, unfortunately.
But this also throws a light on President Hollande himself, on the Socialist Party too. To what extent are they competent, really, to continue governing France?
What we have done more than any government has done in terms of fighting against discrimination, and we will continue to do that, and in terms of strengthening our laws for intelligence services, giving more means to the justice system and the police. And this is something that didn't start in 2012 when François Hollande became president. This is an issue that started years ago, and it will take years to resolve, unfortunately. And France is not the only country that has known terrorism. Just over the past few days, we've seen at least 2 acts of terrorism linked to ISIS in Germany.
Right.
So we see that this is a challenge, and we've seen acts of terrorism also recently in the United States. Mm-hmm. So we know that this is a challenge for all democracies today.
Well, Corinne Narassiguin, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Paris. Thank you. Cathy.
Well, the latest attack in France has raised important questions not only for the authorities and politicians, but also for the mainstream media. How should terrorist attacks be reported? Well, in a radical shift in its editorial policy, the French newspaper Le Monde has declared it will no longer publish photos of perpetrators, extended propaganda documents, or the claims of so-called Islamic State to prevent them being glorified. In an editorial, the paper's director, Jérôme Fenoglio, explained, without an aware attitude from companies who control social networks or mass media, it will be increasingly difficult to stand up to the after effects of the hatred strategy. And these thoughts, debates, or adjustments to the practices of an enemy who reverse against us the tools of our modernity are essential to win, to break this hatred strategy. But the move has sparked widespread debate among journalists and policy experts, with some labelling it a great decision, while others say it sets a very interesting precedent for media in the West. Well, another media organisation which has said it will no longer publish photographs of terrorists is the news network Europe One. Earlier, I spoke to its editor-in-chief. He began by telling me how his organisation is going further still in its editorial policy towards terrorism.
We decided not to name the terrorists because I had a bad feeling in the last Nice attack, because we named the terrorist, but we didn't give a name to all the victims. And yesterday night, when we heard about the name of the guys who made the shooting in the church, I decided that it was enough. And I decided that giving their name was a way to glorify their act. So I think we can do differently. We can present who they are. We can give a lot of information without giving their name.
I completely understand the trauma you feel in France at what has happened. But surely it's not the business of the media to fight the battles that are really the battles of the government.
I don't pretend we are fighting. I don't pretend we are doing a kind of heroic act. I don't pretend anything of all of that. I just think that we can, in a way, stop to glorify all those people who try to destabilize our country. I can tell who they are, I mean, where they're from, their age, their religion, what was their childhood, but I don't have to give their name.
Doesn't it make a mockery of it, though, when all the details, far too many details for comfort for many, are all over the internet?
Yes, I mean, of course, maybe we are only the radio, a few TV, and some websites to decide not to name the terrorists, but it is just a question of morality, I think. And I don't judge the other, and I don't judge the other media that decided to continue to name the terrorist. But I do it because I think it's right.
Surely it is not the job of the media to take a moral judgment. It's the job of the media to report the news.
I still decide to report the news. I still decide to report who are the terrorists. I decide not to give the name because it's my decision, and because I think, from my point of view, that giving the name is a way to glorify them. And I don't think that giving the name is an information in itself.
Clearly,
I'm doing it totally freely.
Clearly, every attack is a personal tragedy, many personal tragedies. What effect do you think the continuation of these attacks is having on the media in terms of how people understand these attacks and how the media reports them in terms of the familiarity with this kind of terrorism?
Yes. This is a very interesting issue and question because, unfortunately, since the past 18 months, French public opinion is getting used to all of that. And I understand that, you know, when the first attack happened in Paris 18 months ago, it was a shock during maybe 2 or 3 weeks. After the Paris attacks on the 13th of November, the shock lasted maybe 10 days, and now it's getting lower and lower. I mean, after Nice, we spoke about Nice attack only 5 days after, and after another attack happened. So it's very difficult to deal with that issue and with the fact that the public opinion is unfortunately used to it.
Nicolas Escalante, thank you very much for joining us. At least 48 people have been killed in a twin bombing in the Syrian town of Qamishli near the Turkish border. The militant Islamic State group have claimed they were behind the attack. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, joins me now. Lindsay, just coming off the back of that discussion about censorship and what the media covers, I mean, in a way, there's accusations that the media already chooses which terrorist attacks they give big coverage to and which not. I mean, let's take this one, for example.
Well, I think there's an argument that we've become inured to the horrendous terrorist attacks which are going on all the time in Syria and Iraq. And we do put more emphasis on what happens for us closer to home. You take this attack today. This was a massive explosion in Qamishli. It was so big that you could hear that windows were broken across the border in Turkey. It seems to have been aimed at a police station which is held by the Syrian Democratic Forces. They're mainly Kurdish, backed by the Americans. We're talking about, you know, up to 50 killed and many more injured. Islamic State claimed it almost immediately. Why is that? Look, it's the same as the reason that we're seeing this stuff in Europe. They're under huge pressure, both in Iraq and Syria. Forces approaching their headquarters in Iraq, Mosul, and a lot of pressure on them in their headquarters in Syria, Raqqa. So they're lashing out. They're lashing out in Europe, and they are lashing out in Syria and Iraq. And the numbers of dead and injured are horrifying.
And you've been covering what's going on in Aleppo very closely. What is the situation there now?
Well, what you have there is the Syrian government and the Russians closing in on rebel forces who are not Islamic State. They're different rebel forces. And the aid agencies have put out a plea because they're really anxious now. 300,000 people under siege. Today, the Syrian forces said that they had cut off the Castello Road. That's the last road into that rebel-held area. That's the last lifeline for food and medicine. They've also been attacking. They attacked a food store. They've attacked 5 health facilities. So we're talking about people who very soon will have no food and no medical facilities. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we're still seeing refugees fleeing Syria. That's another pressure on Europe. It all comes back to the war in Syria and the wars in Iraq. And that's why Europe is under these pressures now.
Lindsay, thanks very much. John.
Now, share prices have reached a 10-year high after new figures showing the economy grew faster than expected in the run-up to the Brexit vote. The figures were boosted by the biggest increase in industrial output since the end of the 1990s. And another vote of confidence came from the pharmaceutical giant GSK, which is going ahead today with a multi-million-pound investment in 3 British sites. Here's our business correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi.
Good news about the second quarter growth figures. The economy is in a fundamentally strong condition as we go into a period of turbulence and uncertainty following the referendum decision.
Today seems to be serving up a rosier economic outlook for Britain. Growth is up, house builders are paying dividends, and big multinationals are putting their money where their mouth is and investing in British shores. In spring, Britain grew by 0.6%. That's faster than economists had predicted, and a better rate than the beginning of 2016. It seems at the same time, Britons have also enjoyed 31 million extra pints.
So does this mean that everything's all right after all? Well, it's worth remembering that these growth figures are all pre-Brexit.
Take, for example, today's data from business group CBI, saying that retail orders have fallen at their fastest pace since 2012. Grocery sales volumes down 30%. At this point, it's not clear whether all these extra drinks are people celebrating or drowning their sorrows.
I think we have to give some time to be able to make an assessment of the impact of the Brexit vote. But there certainly are some encouraging points that have been made. But I think to make a full assessment, I think we need to look at this.
Have you changed your mind then? Have you changed your mind about the economic impact of Brexit?
Well, I don't resolve for many of the points that I was making beforehand about those risks.
So you were wrong, basically. You were wrong.
What I'm saying is that the UK economy, because of what we've done over the last 6 years, is a pretty strong economy.
But just last week, factory orders suggested a massive slowdown, so it would be foolish to think any uncertainty over the next few years won't dent economic progress. But today, the new Chancellor was crowing from City Airport, where a new expansion was announced. Taylor Wimpey, the UK's biggest house builder, saw its shares soar after declaring it was business as usual. While GSK, whose boss Andrew Whitty had been a vocal Remainer, announced it was investing £275 million in UK drugs manufacturing.
While some of the things we were worried about before the vote we're still worried about, much hasn't changed.
That means that Brexit's not that bad after all.
Well, we don't know yet what's going to happen, really. We're in the very early days of the vote. Nothing has changed in reality other than the exchange rate. We don't know what the new terms of trade will be with Europe. We may not know for years.
So far, are you happy with the public messages coming out of the new Prime Minister, the new Chancellor?
I think very, very early days. I think it's very clear that people are taking...
No, then?
No, it's very early days, and I think given it's very early days, the messages that we are hearing are reassuring, but I think everybody would acknowledge that this is a marathon and not a sprint.
It might take decades to really understand the true benefits or the full scale of the problems of the Brexit vote. In the meantime, expect false dawns and panicked reactions as companies and policymakers try and decipher the difference between reality and illusion.
Helia Ebrahimi. Now, history was made in Philadelphia last night when the Democratic Party officially nominated Hillary Clinton as the first woman to lead a major party's presidential ticket. Tonight, on stage, the man whose own presidential run made history 8 years ago, Barack Obama. From race and justice to America's place in an uncertain world, the tropes of his presidency have loomed large over this year's election. Among the key speakers at the Democratic convention, a group of mothers whose children died at the hands of police. Kylie Morris is in Philadelphia. Kylie.
Yes, John, last night, I think this convention has been about, throughout the week, building block by block the case for Hillary Clinton. So we had this very high energy moment, to use a Trumpism, when we saw Hillary Clinton actually finally nominated. But before that, we heard speaker after speaker making the case for Hillary Clinton as a change agent. Indeed, the placards read, change maker. Of course, no one seeks change more keenly than the parents of young African American men and women who've been killed by the police. There was a very potent moment last night on stage when mothers of the movement, some of the mothers of that movement, appeared to endorse Hillary Clinton. They had high expectations of her, that she will be able to build on Barack Obama's legacy. But I think the main message to take away from last night was that after all the rebellion, after all the arguments about policy, after the rebellion led by Bernie Sanders, that finally this was Hillary Clinton's party.
It's an incredible night for American history.
It was one to remember. On the giant screen, center stage, they flipped through the faces of presidents past, all of them men, before Hillary Clinton appeared as though on an intergalactic intercom, floating to Earth to acknowledge her glass-shattering nomination.
Thanks to you and to everyone who's fought so hard to make this possible. And if there are any little girls out there who stayed up late to watch, let me just say, I may become the first woman president, but one of you is next. Thank you all. I can't wait to join you in Philadelphia.
In America, only 5% of top company executives are women, and only 1 in 5 parliamentarians are women.
From the great state of South Dakota.
So in the
land
roll
in
call that
honor
confirmed the votes for Hillary state by state,
50 champion votes.
Women counted out a seismic shift.
Arizona.
For Arizona, it fell to Jerry Emmett, who's 102, to make the call.
And 51 votes for the next president of the United States of America, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
When she was born, women couldn't even vote. On the floor, there were tears too for Bernie, as his brother, who lives in Oxford, paid tribute to the senator's revolution.
It is with enormous pride that I cast my vote for Bernie Sanders.
In a victory for party unity, it was the senator from Vermont who was cast to declare Hillary Clinton the Democratic nominee.
And I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
In this through-the-looking-glass election, it fell to one of the most familiar faces in American politics to render his wife brand new.
In the spring of 1971, I met a girl.
Bill Clinton told their love story, but skipped through any awkward times or extramarital affairs. Hillary may be gold-plated establishment, but he argues that at her core, she's an agent for change.
For this time, Hillary is uniquely qualified to seize the opportunities and reduce the risk we face. And she is still the best darn change maker I have ever known.
Beyond the cheering hordes in downtown Philadelphia, at least outside this party, Democrats were dancing in the street at news of Hillary's nomination.
Just shows the growth and the process that we have made in society, and that we don't confine women to traditional stereotypical roles.
She's the first woman. Is she the right woman?
I'm talking to lots of voters in my community here in Pennsylvania, and folks are excited about Hillary. Women are excited about Hillary, and people are terrified about the option on the other side.
For these women, the nomination of Hillary Clinton is personal and political. As mothers of young black men and women killed by the police, they were greeted by chants of Black Lives Matter when they took the stage to lend their support to the candidate who has championed their cause.
She knows that when a young black life is cut short, it's a national loss. It's a loss that diminishes all of us.
We asked the mother of Michael Brown, who was killed by police in Ferguson, why she's backing Hillary.
Because she's a mother and a grandmother, but before all of that, she's a woman. And she does value life differently than some people do.
Tonight, the country's first African-American president, Barack Obama, will tell the convention it's Hillary's turn to lead the campaign for hope and change.
Well, now, one mother who lost a son in a police shooting is Valerie Castile. Her son, Philando, was shot dead in his car by a police officer earlier this month. We'll be hearing from her in a moment. But first, I should warn you, we're about to show some distressing scenes about what happened. Philando Castile was described by co-workers as a warm and kind-hearted man who cooked for the kids at a Montessori school in Minnesota.
Stay with me. We got pulled over for a busted tail light in the back.
Directly after Philando was shot, his girlfriend live-streamed the scene from inside the car. Her 4-year-old daughter sitting in the back seat, the policeman who shot him standing at the window.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license. Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
Even after police removed her from the car and she's handcuffed, she keeps talking to anyone watching on Facebook.
They threw my phone, Facebook.
Which is how Philando's relatives and friends discovered he was dead. Well, joining us now from Minneapolis is Philando's mother, Valerie, and from Atlanta, her lawyer, Judge Glenda Hatchett. Valerie, how did you learn that your boy had died?
Well, my daughter, first of all, she's on Facebook or whatever, and she saw the live streaming of the actual event. I, on the other hand, I didn't know what was going on. I just heard her screaming and hollering through the house, and I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And she's like, my brother's dying. My brother's been shot. Oh, my God. He's on Facebook. He's dying. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I immediately jumped up, and we just headed out the door. And I'm like, where? Where are they? Where are they? And we really couldn't get a fix on it until she said that it was a sign that stated Falcon Heights, you know, like entry into that little area. And I said, no, I know exactly where I'm going. And we arrived on the scene, and it was cordoned off, and the police, you know, they were of really no assistance to me because, first of all, they didn't know where he was, what hospital, because I was adamant about being with my son because I did not want my son to die by himself.
Did you, forgive me interrupting, but did you ever talk to your son about how to behave, if ever in contact with the police?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really a shame that we as African-American people, we have to have that talk with our sons and our daughters as to if you're approached by the police. Don't say anything. Do exactly what they ask you to do. Just comply. Comply, comply, comply. Because it has gotten to the point where this is a routine thing. Black people getting killed by a police officer, and there's no consequences. No one is held accountable. But I had that talk with my son. Yes, I did.
Right. Now, let me just talk now to your lawyer for a moment. Judge Glenda Hatchett, you're going to fight this case. What real chance?
Absolutely.
What real chance is that there will be justice? And what chance is there even that there will even be a trial?
Well, let me first of all explain that I will not have the responsibility for prosecuting the police officers. I am representing the family on the civil side, but I am doing everything I can to urge that there be a special prosecutor on behalf of the family. I've already made those formal requests. We will be making a formal request to the Department of Justice with the U.S. Attorney General, because we want all eyes on this case. I have to explain that this is a man who was employed, who was loved by his family, adored by the community, who all of his co-workers, all of the children loved him. He had no felony record. He was not combative. He was not fleeing from the police. He was still in his seatbelt when he was shot. He was permitted to have, he had a legal permit to have a gun. And so if this happens to someone who is in full compliance, how can it possibly be justified? And I am going to do everything in my power to raise the level of consciousness and visibility on this case, and we are going to be insisting that the prosecutor proceed vigorously on this case. There is no other alternative.
Let me just come back to you in a moment and go back to Valerie. Valerie, you must have been buoyed by what you saw on the platform of the Democrat convention, because it seems that the Democratic Party and its candidate are determined somehow to rectify this desperate imbalance.
Yes, it needs to stop, because we cannot coexist with this type of behavior. There needs to be accountability. It just can't continue to go on like this, because you don't know how it's going to end. It may not end well, because you have, on the other hand, people who are supposed to protect and serve you, and they're the ones that's actually committing crimes legally. and it has to stop. There has to be accountability.
Right.
This type of behavior shouldn't be going on with our police officers.
Valerie, let me ask your judge friend, Glenda. Judge, what chance do you really think that the establishment, and you're talking to the establishment, you're talking to the Justice Department, what chance they will comply and provide a special prosecutor and answer the requests you're making?
Well, I am very hopeful, and the reason that I am representing the Castile family is because I hope to use the credibility that I have nationally, and I am going to vigorously pursue this. We have asked not only the local district attorney, we've asked the state attorney general and the governor, all in a very formalized request for a special prosecutor.
Right.
There is enough for the Justice Department to come in and do a separate investigation of practices.
Right.
And what we believe has been a history of profiling African American citizens in this community.
Judge
so
Glenda Hatchett.
I operate from the side of hope, and we are going to work vigorously to make sure that this time is different.
Judge, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. And Valerie Castile, thank you very much. And commiserations, and may you reach peace. Thank you very much. Kathy.
Or here, when a black firefighter complained that he was abused and assaulted by police officers, it took 5 years for his case to reach a tribunal. Now, a gross misconduct hearing into Edric Kennedy McFoy's case has collapsed because of investigation failures and delay. But Mr. Kennedy McFoy told this programme that racism is like a disease inside the Met. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel has this exclusive report.
I'm driving down this road. This is Harrow View.
It's been nearly 5 years since Edric Kennedy McFoy, a London firefighter, ended up in a police cell for 13 hours. He's never forgotten that night. It's lived with him ever since, the abuse, the threats, the excessive force, the prejudice, just for trying to help police identify a young attacker. An independent Police Complaints Commission inquiry concluded the police's reaction that night was based purely on his ethnic appearance, that police officers racially stereotyped Mr. Kennedy McFoy.
It's hard for me to go out and work with them knowing that I can't trust them. I find it very hard to trust police. These are guys who served me with this great injustice, and I'm supposed to be able to just carry on and work with these officers.
He takes me in fine detail, as if embedded in his memory, through the events of that night. A police van had closed off the road in response to reports of a noisy party. He saw a black youth throw a rock through one of its windows. He then repeatedly tried to tell officers what he had witnessed, but instead, he says, he was treated as if he was a suspect, and things just escalated.
I've put myself in a semi-recumbent position like this, arms out once again in a non-threatening manner, just trying to talk to the officers. Guys, I haven't done anything wrong. You're acting like wild animals. I've never experienced police officers like this. I'm not threatening. I'm not being aggressive. I'm a firefighter. All my words falling on deaf ears.
Then he says without warning, he was tasered, handcuffed, and ultimately transported to a cell. He was charged with obstruction, but the court declared him innocent. And today he learnt that no officer would be held accountable following the collapse of a gross misconduct hearing.
I never, in a million years, would expect something like this to happen to me. I know it happens, but I live a good lifestyle. I'm of good character. I'm a firefighter. I've never been in trouble with the police. And I just think if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. I think racism is like a disease within the Met Police Service, and it can only be rooted out from within.
Channel 4 News can reveal a year ago the firefighter received substantial damages from the Metropolitan Police. The head of Professional Standards, Deputy Assistant Commissioner Fiona Taylor, wrote to him saying,
It's plain what happened to you on this night should not have happened, and for that, on behalf of the MPS, I apologise. This is an incident from which the MPS can properly learn lessons.
I failed to understand how I could be paid substantial damages and receive a full apology, yet the officers in question failed to be reprimanded for their actions. So it's painful, you know. I feel like 5 years of my life has been stolen from me.
Tonight there was another apology in this saga, not just to Mr. Kennedy McFoy, but also to the officers who had been facing misconduct charges. This time it was from the Independent Police Complaints Commission for its investigation failures and delays. In a statement it said,
"We would like to take this opportunity to apologise to them. The withdrawal follows procedural shortfalls identified by the IPCC. We will be carrying out an in-depth review."
Not much solace then for the 33-year-old fire crew manager who feels a deep sense of injustice for being denied the chance to have his story put on record. The Metropolitan Police, which has always denied liability, said tonight,
"We fully recognise that the misconduct hearing not going ahead is damaging for the complainants and for the public, who need to have confidence in the way officers are held to account. Any allegation that officers have behaved in a racist way is treated really seriously, and all are fully and properly investigated."
All that remains for the firefighter is an invitation from the Met to help in their diversity training.
And will you?
Well, I think the first step to any problem is acknowledging that you have a problem. As yet, they have not acknowledged the wrongdoings. So until they do so, there's nothing for me to help them with, because there is no problem until you acknowledge it.
Firefighter Edric Kennedy McFoy talking to Simon Israel about allegations he was abused by police officers because of his race. John.
Abused, attacked, ignored because of their caste. They are literally the lowest of the low. This is everyday life for the Dalits, Hinduism's lowest caste, the untouchables. In the Western Indian state of Gujarat, a new climate of discrimination has provoked a far more extreme response. Last month, 4 Dalit men were publicly beaten up after a video showing them skinning a dead cow. But now a fight back is gaining momentum, as our Asia correspondent Jonathan Miller has been finding out, and we should warn you, his report does contain some distressing scenes.
After 2 millennia, India's untouchables have had enough. It's the 21st century superpower they live in that's out of touch, they say. They reject the iniquities of caste, a brutal Hindu social hierarchy which today condemns 300 million people to live as non-persons, outcasts, the lowest of the low, even among what are still officially referred to as the backward castes. They call themselves Dalits, the broken people, the oppressed, downtrodden. But now they're rising up.
They want their share in power, they want their share in production, they want their share in education, they want their share in society also. They want equal status in the society.
The Dalit hero? This man in glasses, the late B.R. Ambedkar. In his name, a lexicon of emancipation has taken root. They talk of aspiration and social revolution.
Caste is to India what apartheid was to South Africa, what segregation was to America. And a lot of these people have been chanting, "Hail Ambedkar." Ambedkar wrote modern India's post-colonial constitution, and he also was a Dalit. And he said there cannot be a more degrading form of social organization than caste. 70 years on, these people, a quarter of India's population, are still enslaved by the caste system.
Under India's constitution, the very concept of untouchability is forbidden, a crime, punishable by law. But under India's current Hindu nationalist government, discrimination against Dalits has plumbed new depths. In Gujarat, attacks have risen more than fivefold.
These people are from the society only. These people are protesting against the inhuman treatment the community people have received from the so-called upper caste people.
The touch paper that set the fire in Gujarat this month was shocking viral video of the beating of 4 Dalit men doing a dirty Dalit task, skinning a dead cow for a tannery. There's 20 minutes of this footage, filmed by the perpetrators. Using police batons, the attackers took it in turns until the humiliation was complete. The father begs for mercy, but he was beaten too. Tied to a vehicle, the beating continued outside the local police station. Only a handful of the attackers have been arrested. In this, the land of the holy cow, the thugs belong to a cow protection vigilante gang dubbed the Hindu Taliban. Such groups have flourished since Prime Minister Narendra Modi's brand of Hindu chauvinism became acceptable. In India, killing a cow can get you 10 years in jail. Dalit lives come cheaper though. Across India, hundreds of Dalits are murdered every year, and hundreds more Dalit women raped. More often than not, the perpetrators get away with it. Every day, the newspapers are full of reports of attacks on Dalits, the length and breadth of India. Over the weekend, a 14-year-old girl was multiply raped and murdered in New Delhi. That got 3 paragraphs. The Prime Minister has remained silent. We sought an interview with Gujarat's Chief Minister, who belongs to Narendra Modi's ruling BJP. Our repeated requests went unanswered. In the remote Gujarati village of Abrampura, local Dalits who live on the edge of the village have been subject to an illegal social boycott by their upper caste neighbours for 8 weeks now. 5-year-old Ravi Kumar reportedly got into a scrap with a boy from a higher caste family. The playground squabble escalated. Ravi's father claims he and other family members were then attacked and beaten. They told me how, ever since, they've been barred from working as farm labourers, denied access to local transport and shops. Even the barber refuses to cut their hair. They can't go to the Hindu temple, can't sell their goat's milk, and their animals have been prohibited from grazing on public land. It's like we don't exist, they said.
6 families have already been forced to leave in search of better prospects. We don't want to do that. The upper castes have the land, we are the labor. But we haven't been able to work and we haven't been able to live in peace. This is very painful. All we want is justice.
Local police accompanied us as we made our way into the village proper to seek an explanation from the hostile neighbours. Kamlesh Patel, a businessman, listened to me quizzically. He denied everything. No problem here, he said, and everyone agreed. There wasn't a Dalit to be seen. In an effort to emancipate future generations, a Dalit-run charity in Ahmedabad, Gujarat's biggest city, offers after-hours schooling for Dalit children aged 5 to 13. Thousands have now been through these classes. Many have made it to university. A handful have managed to climb the ranks of the civil service. Others have broken into the corporate world. It's rare, though. They cite the Dalit mantra, B.R. Ambedkar's words: educate, agitate, organize.
Being a Dalit in India is being rejected and discarded. Being a Dalit means remaining sort of permanently untouchable. To me is nothing but the existence of feudalism in India. It is a cultural conspiracy on the part of the majority of the Hindus. They want to keep it intact. This is something we should be terribly ashamed of. As a nation, ashamed of as a nation.
Hinduism teaches that subordinated castes are being punished for the deeds of past lives. Their fault, their bad karma. The labourers, rat catchers, sewer cleaners and street sweepers of India are now waking up to the fact that it's not their fault. It's within their power to shatter the myth of their untouchability, that dignity and justice are within their grasp. The Dalits are a waking giant.
Jonathan Miller reporting from Gujarat. John.
After the break, something completely uplifting, how the world of virtual reality is having a real-life impact. The technology has been pioneered to help people with artificial limbs cope with their injuries and adapt to the new prosthetics. Virtual reality isn't just about games and entertainment, it's becoming a positive tool in real life. The technology is being pioneered to help amputees to cope with the next generation of prosthetic limbs. As our technology reporter, Jeff White, explains.
It's shaken up the world of games and movies. Virtual reality offers a dive into all-encompassing cyberspace. But back in the real world, gamers are using the same tech for something a bit more serious.
To see the hand there in front of me, but not be wearing a limb, was really surreal. It was really out of this world, if you like.
Kevin lost his arm in an industrial accident 35 years ago. Now he's helping develop a unique project.
So you don't want to put the lid back on the pot?
A kind of try-before-you-buy scheme for artificial limbs.
By contracting the muscles, as I normally would do when I'm wearing the normal limb, I was opening and closing the hand and able to move items from one location to another.
Those reflexes enable Kevin to make his electronic limb work. It's a vital decider in whether an amputee's suitable for an expensive prosthetic. But up until now, testing for those reflexes took time and wasn't as fun as VR.
We're talking about a 3-day course to actually go and learn how to use the opening and closing of the hand. And you would be moving shapes, opening doors, making sure that they're making sure that you're capable of using it, and then you're sent away to fend for yourself.
So, do you want to go for that Coke can?
That training is even harder if you've never had a limb.
Imagine that for a congenital amputee, they may have never had an arm. So, what are those muscles? So, like, it's very abstract at the moment. It's like imagine grabbing an apple. If you've never done it before, I can imagine it's very difficult to understand what to do.
Ivan's tech could not only speed up the testing, but also train amputees to use the new limb. It's proving a hit with patients.
Some patients said, one in particular said that it's been very emotional for him to see a hand again, but he said in a good way. But he was like, and some of them just didn't want to go out, but they were like, can I have this and just keep playing with it? Like.
Some amputees aren't suitable for an electronic limb. Steve Hopwood's nerves were too badly damaged by his motorcycle accident, but he's helping an MOD-funded project to tackle one of the most distressing aspects of amputation.
A very angry mass of angry pins and needles, like a swarm of bees buzzing around this elbow area.
Phantom limb pain affects most amputees. It's cruel and it's debilitating.
It takes over everything. You know, I couldn't watch telly, I couldn't talk to my family.
Up until now, the treatments were pretty low tech.
So in the early days, they used basically a mirror, and mirroring the image of the intact limb in the position of the residual limb, of the missing limb. And just doing that, seeing the reflection or mirror image in the position of your missing limb had an impact on reducing pain.
VR and machinery can pull the same trick, only much, much better.
The brain sends the motor command to the hand to open or close. The eyes are telling the brain, I can see it, the hand is opening and closing. Your spatial awareness is telling you this is how my arm is located in space. You can feel the weight properties of the object you just pick up. And we hope by doing this The brain will embody the virtual limb, and this will result in a reduction of pain.
This project with Middlesex University could help thousands reconnect with a lost part of themselves.
When I could actually move the hand and I was able to pick the objects up and put them down, oh, that's something that I'm doing, which I haven't done for 30 years.
Another 30 years and Steve's computerized arm could be animated on to his real world. Games like Pokemon Go are already blending the virtual with reality. It's tech that promises, quite literally, to change the way we see the world.
Jeff White reporting. We're back 7 tomorrow. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Have a great evening.
Good evening.